Elena Vasquez had been staring at the same rejection letter for 3 minutes, the words blurring together as she read them for the 7th time that morning. The Metropolitan Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Division regretted to inform her that her application had been declined due to concerns about her physical readiness for high-intensity tactical operations. At 5 feet 4 inches and weighing barely 130 pounds, she apparently didn't fit the profile of what Commander Richard Blackwood considered SWAT material. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The letter sat on her kitchen table, next to a half-empty cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside her modest apartment in the Riverside district, the morning sun cast long shadows across the linoleum floor, highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny reminders of dreams that seemed just out of reach. Elena had been a patrol officer for 6 years, working the toughest beats in the city, building a reputation for staying calm under pressure and solving problems that other officers couldn't handle. None of that seemed to matter to the selection committee. Her partner, Detective Marcus Chen, had warned her that the SWAT application process was more about politics than performance. The unit had a certain image to maintain, he'd explained, and that image apparently didn't include petite Hispanic women who looked like they belonged in a library, rather than storming buildings with automatic weapons. Elena had applied anyway, driven by a conviction that she could contribute something valuable to the team that had nothing to do with her ability to break down doors or intimidate suspects through sheer physical presence. The rejection stung more than she'd expected. Not because she hadn't anticipated it, but because the reasoning felt so fundamentally wrong. 6 years of exemplary service, commendations for marksmanship, crisis negotiation training, and a master's degree in criminal psychology had been reduced to a single concern about her physical stature. The committee had looked at her application and seen limitations rather than capabilities. Elena crumpled the letter into a tight ball and threw it across the room, where it bounced off the wall and landed next to her service weapon, which she'd placed on the counter after returning from her night shift. The Glock 19 seemed to mock her with its silent presence, a reminder that she could outshoot most of the officers in her precinct, but couldn't convince a committee of bureaucrats that marksmanship might be more valuable than muscle mass in certain tactical situations. 3 weeks after the rejection, Elena found herself standing in the lobby of the Metropolitan Police Training Academy, clutching a different piece of paper that had arrived unexpectedly in her departmental mailbox. The memo was brief and official, signed by Deputy Chief Patricia Hernandez, requesting her presence at what was described as a special training evaluation session for selected personnel. The language was vague, but the timing seemed more than coincidental. The training academy smelled of floor wax and determination, its hallways lined with photographs of graduating classes stretching back decades. Elena had walked these same corridors during her initial police training, but returning now felt different. Then, she'd been one of dozens of recruits all working toward the same goal. Today, she was walking toward something uncertain, carrying the weight of recent disappointment and a growing suspicion that this evaluation might be connected to her SWAT application in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Deputy Chief Hernandez was waiting in Conference Room B, along with 2 other people Elena didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, and a younger man in tactical gear who looked like he could bench press a patrol car. The dynamic in the room felt formal but not hostile, which was more than Elena had expected given her recent experience with departmental committees. Officer Vasquez, Deputy Chief Hernandez began, gesturing toward an empty chair at the conference table. "Thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet Captain Sarah Mitchell from the Regional Counterterrorism Task Force and Sergeant David Park from our Tactical Training Division. We have a proposition that might interest you." Elena took the offered seat, her mind racing through possibilities. The Counter-Terrorism Task Force was several levels above SWAT in terms of prestige and responsibility, but she couldn't imagine why they would be interested in an officer who had just been rejected from what was supposedly a lower-tier unit. The whole situation felt surreal, like she'd stumbled into someone else's career trajectory by accident. Captain Mitchell leaned forward, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "Officer Vasquez, your application to the SWAT unit was forwarded to our attention because of some specific qualifications that caught our interest. Your marksmanship scores are exceptional, and your psychological evaluation suggested an unusual ability to maintain accuracy under stress. We'd like to test those capabilities in a more comprehensive way." The explanation raised more questions than it answered. Elena had always been a good shot, but she'd never considered her marksmanship exceptional compared to other officers who spent their free time at competitive shooting ranges. Her training had been practical rather than competitive, focused on the kinds of situations she might encounter during routine patrol work rather than the precision shooting that characterized specialized units. Sergeant Park consulted a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be her service record. "Your qualifying scores have been consistently in the 98th percentile for the past 4 years. More importantly, your accuracy doesn't decrease under stress the way it does for most officers. During your last qualification, you actually shot better during the timed stress course than during the static portion of the test." Elena remembered that qualification session. The stress course had involved shooting while moving, responding to multiple targets, and engaging threats while simulated explosions and shouting created chaos around the firing line. She'd felt more focused during that portion of the test, not less. The noise and movement had seemed to sharpen her concentration rather than disrupting it, but she'd assumed that was normal. "What kind of test are you talking about?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer would involve putting her skills to some kind of extreme evaluation that would either prove her capabilities or demonstrate their limits in ways that might be professionally embarrassing. Deputy Chief Hernandez exchanged glances with the other two officials before responding. "We're developing a new training protocol for precision shooting under adverse conditions. The scenarios are designed to simulate real-world situations where standard tactical approaches might not be effective. We need officers who can maintain accuracy when everything around them is falling apart." The explanation sounded reasonable, but Elena detected something else in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't just about developing training protocols. There was an urgency that suggested they needed someone with her specific skills for reasons that went beyond general program development. The timing, coming so soon after her SWAT rejection, felt too convenient to be coincidental. Captain Mitchell continued, "The evaluation would take place over 3 days at our advanced training facility. You'd be testing equipment, techniques, and scenarios that are still in development. Your performance would be confidential, and participation would be voluntary. However, successful completion might open doors to opportunities that aren't available through traditional channels." Elena understood the subtext. This was a chance to prove herself in ways that the SWAT selection committee had never bothered to evaluate. More importantly, it was an opportunity to demonstrate that her size and appearance had nothing to do with her ability to perform under pressure. The evaluation might be developmental, but the implications for her career were very real. "When would this take place?" Elena asked, though she'd already decided to accept whatever they were offering. The alternative was returning to patrol work with the knowledge that she'd never even been given a real chance to show what she could do in a specialized unit. "Next week," Sergeant Park replied. "Monday through Wednesday. You'd be released from regular duties, and the evaluation would be treated as a special assignment. Full pay, no impact on your regular schedule, and complete confidentiality regarding the results." Elena nodded her acceptance, understanding that she was agreeing to something that would either validate her belief in her own capabilities or definitively prove that her ambitions exceeded her abilities. Either way, she'd finally have a clear answer about whether she belonged in specialized law enforcement or should be satisfied with the career path that had been implicitly chosen for her by others. The meeting concluded with administrative details and paperwork that made the whole arrangement feel official and legitimate. Elena left the training academy with a folder full of documents and a sense of anticipation that she hadn't felt since her initial police training. The evaluation might be a long shot, but it was a shot that the SWAT selection committee had never been willing to give her. That evening, Elena called her father, retired Sergeant Miguel Vasquez, who had spent 30 years with the state police before retiring to a small ranch outside the city. He'd been the one who taught her to shoot, starting with a .22 rifle when she was 12 years old, progressing through larger calibers as her skills and confidence developed. His approach had been methodical and patient, emphasizing precision over speed, mental discipline over physical strength. "They want to test my shooting," Elena explained, describing the meeting without revealing the specific details that were supposed to remain confidential. 3 days of evaluation at their advanced facility. It sounds like it might lead to opportunities that wouldn't be available otherwise. Miguel's response was characteristically direct. "You can outshoot anyone in that department, Elena." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You always could. The question is whether they're smart enough to recognize what that means in practical terms. Most people think shooting is about the gun, but it's about the person behind the gun. You've got something that can't be taught or trained. Elena appreciated her father's confidence, but she also understood that the evaluation would involve more than just shooting accurately at stationary targets. The scenarios would be designed to test her abilities under conditions that simulated real tactical situations, where split-second decisions could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. Her childhood target practice on the ranch had been good preparation, but this would be something entirely different. The weekend before the evaluation, Elena spent both days at the public shooting range, working through drills that might prepare her for whatever challenges the training facility would present. She practiced shooting while moving, engaging multiple targets in sequence, and maintaining accuracy while dealing with distractions and time pressure. Her scores were consistently excellent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test would involve variables she couldn't anticipate or prepare for. Other officers at the range noticed her intensive preparation and offered encouragement, though most assumed she was training for some kind of competitive shooting event rather than a career-defining evaluation. Elena appreciated their support, but didn't correct their assumptions. The fewer people who knew about the evaluation, the less embarrassing it would be if she failed to meet the standards they were looking for. Monday morning arrived with unusual weather for the season. Heavy clouds and intermittent rain that created challenging visibility conditions. Elena drove to the advanced training facility, located 40 miles outside the city in a complex of buildings that looked more like a small college campus than a police training center. The facility was newer and more sophisticated than anything she'd seen before, with equipment and technology that suggested funding levels well above what typical police departments could afford. Sergeant Park met her at the main entrance, his demeanor professional, but more relaxed than it had been during the conference room meeting. "Ready for this?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer would be affirmative, regardless of how she actually felt about the challenges ahead. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure anyone could truly be ready for an evaluation whose parameters remained largely mysterious. She'd prepared as thoroughly as possible, but preparation could only take her so far when she didn't know exactly what she was preparing for. The first day began with baseline assessments that seemed relatively straightforward. Marksmanship tests at various distances, shooting while moving, engaging multiple targets, and maintaining accuracy under time pressure. Elena's performance was strong across all categories, but she noticed that the evaluators were paying attention to factors beyond just her scores. They watched her breathing, her stance, her recovery time between shots, and the way she adapted to different weapons and scenarios. Captain Mitchell observed from a distance, taking notes on a tablet and occasionally conferring with other evaluators who appeared to be analyzing data in real time. The whole process felt more scientific than the typical police training Elena was accustomed to, as if they were studying her performance rather than simply measuring it. Interesting, one of the evaluators commented after she completed a particularly challenging course of fire that involved shooting around obstacles while moving through a maze-like structure. Your accuracy actually improved as the course became more complex. Most people show decreased performance as the stress level increases. Elena hadn't noticed that pattern herself, but she'd felt more focused during the complex scenarios rather than less. The additional challenges seemed to sharpen her concentration, eliminating distractions and forcing her to rely on instincts that had been developed through years of training. The observation suggested that whatever they were evaluating went beyond simple marksmanship skills. The second day introduced scenarios that were more realistic and considerably more stressful. Hostage situations where she had to engage threats while avoiding civilian casualties, moving target scenarios that required tracking and precision shooting, and complex tactical problems that demanded both accuracy and quick decision-making. Elena found herself drawing on training she'd received years earlier, techniques that had seemed theoretical at the time, but now proved surprisingly relevant. During one particularly challenging scenario, she was required to neutralize 3 armed suspects who were positioned at different elevations and distances, all while protecting a hostage who was being used as a human shield. The shot angles were difficult, the lighting was poor, and she had less than 30 seconds to complete the engagement before the scenario would be scored as a failure. Elena took a deep breath, assessed the situation, and made her shots in rapid succession. 3 targets down, hostage protected, total time elapsed 22 seconds. The evaluators exchanged glances that suggested her performance had exceeded their expectations, though they maintained professional composure and moved on to the next scenario without comment. The third day brought weather conditions that made outdoor shooting challenging, with wind gusts that could affect bullet trajectory and rain that reduced visibility and made equipment handling more difficult. Elena had trained in similar conditions before, but never as part of a formal evaluation where her performance was being measured against standards she didn't fully understand. The final scenario of the evaluation was the most complex yet. A multi-stage course that required her to move through a building, engaging targets at various distances while avoiding civilian casualties and neutralizing threats in the correct sequence. The scenario was designed to simulate a real-world tactical situation where a single officer might need to operate independently while maintaining communication with a command team. Elena approached the scenario methodically, using techniques she'd learned during her patrol training but adapting them to the specific requirements of precision shooting under pressure. She moved through the building systematically, engaging targets as they presented themselves, maintaining awareness of her surroundings and the location of potential threats. The final target was the most challenging, a long-distance shot through a narrow window, opening while she was positioned on an unstable platform that simulated shooting from a moving vehicle. The angle was difficult, the target was partially obscured, and she had only one opportunity to make the shot before the scenario would end. Elena steadied herself, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, striking the target in the precise location required for the scenario to be scored as successful. The evaluators recorded her performance and began collecting their equipment, signaling that the 3-day evaluation was complete. Captain Mitchell approached as Elena was securing her gear, her expression revealing nothing about how the evaluation had gone. "Officer Vasquez, thank you for your participation in this process. Your performance will be analyzed over the next few days, and we'll be in touch with our conclusions. In the meantime, please remember that all aspects of this evaluation are confidential." Elena left the training facility with more questions than answers, but with a sense of satisfaction that she'd performed at the highest level of her capabilities. Whatever the evaluators had been looking for, she'd given them her best effort under challenging conditions. The results would determine whether her best effort was sufficient for whatever opportunities they might be considering. The drive back to the city gave her time to process the experience and consider what it might mean for her future. The evaluation had been unlike anything she'd encountered in her police career, more demanding and more comprehensive than any training or testing she'd previously experienced. If nothing else, it had proven to herself that she could perform under pressure in ways that went far beyond routine patrol work. A week later, Elena was completing paperwork in the precinct when Detective Chen approached her desk with an expression that suggested he had news that would be significant for her career. He was carrying a manila envelope with official departmental markings, the kind of correspondence that typically contained either very good news or very bad news. "This came down from administration," Chen said, placing the envelope on her desk. "Looks important, and there's been some talk upstairs about special assignments and new opportunities. Word is that some people in high places have been asking questions about your qualifications and availability." Elena opened the envelope carefully, her mind racing through possibilities. The contents would either validate everything she'd hoped the evaluation might accomplish, or confirm that she'd been naive to think that exceptional performance could overcome institutional biases about what kind of person belonged in specialized units. The letter was brief and official, signed by Deputy Chief Hernandez and Captain Mitchell. Elena's performance during the evaluation had been exceptional, ranking in the top percentile across all measured categories. More importantly, her ability to maintain accuracy under stress had demonstrated capabilities that were rare and valuable for certain types of specialized operations. The letter concluded with an invitation to join a newly formed precision shooting unit that would operate under the Counter-Terrorism Task Force, with responsibilities that included high-risk tactical operations, dignitary protection, and specialized threat response. The position would come with an immediate promotion to detective, specialized training, and equipment that reflected the unit's unique mission requirements. Elena read the letter twice, hardly believing that the opportunity she dreamed of had materialized in a form that exceeded her original ambitions. The SWAT unit that had rejected her application suddenly seemed like a stepping stone rather than a destination, a necessary disappointment that had led to something far more significant. Detective Chen was watching her reaction with obvious curiosity, but Elena maintained her composure as she folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. "Looks like things are about to change," she said, though she couldn't reveal the specific details of what those changes would involve. That evening, Elena called her father to share the news, though she couldn't provide the full details of what the new assignment would entail. Miguel's response was characteristically understated, but deeply satisfying. "I always knew you had something special, Elena. The question was whether the right people would be smart enough to recognize it. Sounds like they finally are." Elena understood that her career was about to take a direction she'd never imagined possible, moving from patrol work to specialized operations that would challenge her in ways that extended far beyond anything she'd experienced before. The rejection from SWAT had been disappointing, but it had also been the catalyst that led to opportunities that wouldn't have been available through traditional channels. The simple woman who had been rejected from SWAT training was about to become something entirely different, transformed by the recognition that exceptional marksmanship was just the beginning of what she could contribute to law enforcement. The evaluation had been a test, but it had also been a doorway to a future that would prove that competence and character mattered more than appearances or conventional expectations. Elena's journey from rejection to recognition was just beginning, but she already understood that the most important battles were fought not on training ranges or in committee rooms, but in the moments when individuals chose to pursue their capabilities, regardless of the obstacles that others placed in their path. The shot that had broken the course record was just the first of many that would define her career and prove that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Detective Elena Vasquez reported to the Counter-Terrorism Task Force headquarters on a Monday morning that felt different from any other day in her 6-year law enforcement career. The building itself was a testament to federal funding and interagency cooperation, with security measures that made the regular police precinct look like a convenience store. Biometric scanners, reinforced glass, and personnel who carried themselves with the quiet confidence of people who dealt with threats that most officers never encountered. Captain Mitchell was waiting in the main briefing room, along with 4 other individuals who would comprise Elena's new unit. The team was smaller than she'd expected, but their credentials were impressive. Detective Marcus Freeman, a former Marine sniper with combat experience in 3 different theaters. Sergeant Lisa Chun, a former FBI negotiator who had transitioned to tactical operations after a particularly difficult hostage situation. Officer David Rodriguez, an explosive specialist who looked like he could disarm a bomb while solving a crossword puzzle. And Detective Sarah Kim, whose background in cybersecurity seemed out of place until Elena learned that modern precision operations required as much digital intelligence as physical skill. The dynamic in the room was immediately different from anything Elena had experienced in regular police work. These weren't patrol officers or detectives investigating routine crimes. They were specialists who had been selected for capabilities that went beyond standard law enforcement training, brought together to handle situations that required precision, discretion, and skills that couldn't be found in normal police units. Captain Mitchell began the briefing with an overview that was both comprehensive and deliberately vague. The Precision Response Unit, as it was officially designated, would handle situations requiring specialized marksmanship capabilities in high-risk environments. Hostage situations where standard tactical approaches weren't feasible. Dignitary protection assignments where threats might emerge at distances that challenged conventional security protocols. Counter-terrorism operations where civilian casualties had to be avoided at all costs. Elena listened to the description and realized that her rejection from SWAT had been a blessing in disguise. This unit operated at a level of sophistication and responsibility that made SWAT look like a training exercise. The equipment alone reflected budget allocations that suggested federal involvement and missions that extended beyond local law enforcement jurisdiction. Detective Freeman leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with the kind of professional assessment that comes from years of evaluating people under pressure. "So you're the one who broke the course record during evaluation," he observed, his tone neutral, but clearly interested in understanding what kind of person could achieve that level of performance. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure what breaking the course record actually meant in practical terms. The evaluation had been challenging, but she'd approached it the same way she approached everything else, methodically, professionally, and with complete focus on the task at hand. The idea that her performance had been exceptional felt surreal. Sergeant Chun consulted a tablet displaying what appeared to be Elena's evaluation results. 97% accuracy under stress conditions, with improved performance as complexity increased. Most people show degraded accuracy when you add time pressure and environmental challenges. Your scores actually went up. The observation aligned with Elena's own experience during the evaluation, though she'd never considered the pattern particularly unusual. Challenging situations seemed to sharpen her focus rather than undermining it, eliminating distractions, and forcing her to rely on training and instincts that performed better under pressure than during routine practice. Captain Mitchell continued the briefing with specifics that made Elena understand why the selection process had been so thorough and secretive. The unit's first assignment would involve providing overwatch security for an international diplomatic conference where intelligence suggested potential threats from multiple sources. The shooting positions would be at extreme distances, the political implications would be enormous, and there would be no margin for error. Elena found herself mentally calculating the variables involved in long-distance precision shooting under real-world conditions. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, bullet drop compensation, and the psychological pressure of knowing that a single mistake could have international consequences. The technical challenges were significant, but they were also exactly the kind of problems she'd been training to solve without realizing it. The team spent the remainder of the morning reviewing equipment that was far more sophisticated than anything Elena had used before. Custom rifles with advanced optics, ballistic computers that could calculate environmental variables in real time, and communication systems that would allow coordination with multiple agencies simultaneously. Everything was designed for precision and reliability under conditions where standard police equipment would be inadequate. Detective Rodriguez demonstrated the explosive detection equipment that would complement the unit's precision capabilities. Modern threats often involved improvised devices that could be triggered remotely, requiring team members to identify and neutralize hazards while maintaining their primary mission focus. The integration of different specialties reflected the complex nature of the situations they would be handling. Elena's introduction to the unit's training regimen began that afternoon with scenarios that were more demanding than anything she'd encountered during her evaluation. Moving targets at distances exceeding 600 meters, shooting positions that required creativity and adaptation, and time constraints that simulated real-world pressure where hesitation could be fatal. The training facility included an urban simulation area that replicated the kind of environments where the unit would actually operate. Multi-story buildings with realistic sightlines, civilian mannequins that required target discrimination, and environmental variables that changed throughout each exercise. Elena quickly discovered that her patrol experience provided advantages that her teammates sometimes lacked, particularly in reading situations and identifying threats among innocent bystanders. Detective Freeman worked with Elena on advanced marksmanship techniques that went far beyond basic police training. Shooting from unconventional positions, compensating for moving platforms, and maintaining accuracy while wearing full tactical gear that restricted movement and visibility. His military background provided insights into precision shooting that civilian law enforcement rarely encountered. The technical aspects of long-distance shooting proved more complex than Elena had anticipated. Ballistic calculations that accounted for variables she'd never considered, wind reading techniques that required constant environmental monitoring, and equipment adjustments that could affect accuracy at distances where millimeter differences translated into mission success or failure. Sergeant Chen focused on the psychological aspects of precision shooting under pressure, techniques for maintaining focus when everything around you is chaos, and decision-making protocols that help shooters avoid hesitation during critical moments. Her FBI background provided perspectives on hostage situations and negotiation failures that often required precision shooting as a last resort option. Elena discovered that her natural abilities were amplified by proper training and equipment, but also that the responsibilities of precision shooting in real operations extended far beyond simply hitting targets accurately. Every shot had to be justified legally and tactically, documented thoroughly, and coordinated with multiple agencies whose protocols might conflict with immediate tactical requirements. The unit's first operational assignment came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence indicated that a high-value terrorism suspect would be attending a public event where conventional security measures would be inadequate due to the civilian population and political sensitivities involved. The suspect had been evading capture for months, moving between countries and using diplomatic cover to avoid law enforcement action. Elena found herself assigned to the primary overwatch position, a responsibility that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier when she was being rejected from SWAT training. The irony wasn't lost on her that the committee who had questioned her physical readiness for tactical operations had missed the fact that precision shooting required mental discipline rather than physical strength. The mission briefing took place in a secure conference room with representatives from multiple agencies, each bringing different perspectives and requirements that had to be coordinated into a coherent operational plan. The FBI was concerned about evidence preservation and legal procedures. The State Department worried about diplomatic implications and international relations. Local police focused on crowd control and civilian safety. Elena listened to the discussion and realized that her role would be critical to mission success, but also that the political and legal consequences of any action she took would extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The suspect had to be captured rather than killed if possible, but the intelligence suggested he might resist violently if cornered. Captain Mitchell assigned Elena to the most challenging shooting position, a location that offered clear sight lines to the target area but required shots at distances that would test her capabilities under real-world conditions. The position was also the most exposed, requiring her to maintain readiness for extended periods while remaining concealed from both the suspect and the civilian population. The surveillance phase began 3 days before the public event, with Elena and Detective Freeman establishing their overwatch position in a building that had been quietly secured by federal agents. The location provided excellent visibility but required them to remain in position for 12-hour shifts while monitoring radio traffic and maintaining readiness for immediate action. Elena found the surveillance work more mentally demanding than physically challenging. Hours of observation punctuated by moments of intense focus when the suspect or potential threats appeared in her scope. The psychological pressure of knowing that she might need to take a life-changing shot at any moment created a level of stress that was different from anything she'd experienced during training. Detective Freeman proved to be an excellent partner, his military experience providing insights into maintaining alertness and focus during extended operations. He also served as a spotter, helping Elena track environmental variables and potential targets while maintaining communication with the command team. Their coordination developed rapidly as they adapted to each other's working styles and communication patterns. The intelligence picture evolved constantly as other team members provided updates about the suspect's movements and behavior patterns. Elena learned that real operations involved far more uncertainty than training scenarios, with plans that had to be modified continuously as new information became available and circumstances changed. On the morning of the event, Elena took her position before dawn, checking equipment and establishing communication protocols that would allow her to coordinate with multiple agencies simultaneously. The weight of responsibility was enormous, knowing that her actions might determine whether the operation succeeded or failed, and whether innocent people were protected or endangered. The suspect appeared in her scope at 10:47 a.m., moving through the crowd with the casual confidence of someone who believed himself to be safe among civilians and diplomatic protection. Elena tracked his movement, noting his behavior patterns, and identifying potential escape routes that might require her intervention. Detective Freeman provided environmental updates through their private communication channel, monitoring wind conditions and other variables that could affect shot accuracy at the distances they were working. Elena adjusted her scope settings accordingly, maintaining readiness while hoping that the suspect would surrender peacefully when approached by ground teams. The arrest attempt began at 11:15 a.m., when federal agents moved to apprehend the suspect during what intelligence had identified as his most vulnerable moment. Elena watched through her scope as the situation developed, her finger resting near the trigger guard, but not on the trigger itself, following protocols that required explicit authorization before engaging. The suspect's reaction was immediate and violent. Instead of surrendering, he produced a concealed weapon and began firing into the crowd, creating exactly the kind of chaos that conventional security measures couldn't handle effectively. Elena received authorization to engage from the command team as civilians began falling around the suspect's position. The shot required compensation for wind conditions, moving targets, and civilian positions that restricted her angle of engagement. Elena controlled her breathing, calculated the environmental variables, and squeezed the trigger during the natural respiratory pause that provided maximum stability. The bullet traveled over 400 meters in less than half a second, striking the suspect in the shoulder and disabling him without causing fatal injuries. The aftermath of the engagement was more complex than Elena had anticipated. Medical teams rushed to treat both the suspect and the civilians he had wounded. Investigative teams began documenting the scene and collecting evidence. Political officials started making statements about the successful operation while carefully avoiding details that might compromise ongoing investigations. Elena remained in position until officially released by the command team, maintaining overwatch capabilities in case the situation developed additional complications. The psychological impact of taking her first operational shot was significant. Though her training helped her maintain professional composure while processing the emotional aspects of using deadly force in defense of innocent people. Detective Freeman provided crucial support during the immediate aftermath, helping Elena maintain situational awareness while dealing with the adrenaline and stress reactions that followed any critical incident. His experience with similar situations proved invaluable in helping her understand that the psychological processing would continue for days or weeks after the immediate tactical situation was resolved. The debriefing session took place at Counter-Terrorism Task Force headquarters the following day, with representatives from all participating agencies providing their assessments of the operation's success and areas for improvement. Elena's shot was analyzed from multiple angles, with ballistic experts confirming that her accuracy under those conditions had been exceptional. Captain Mitchell's evaluation was professional, but clearly impressed by Elena's performance under pressure. The shot placement was perfect for the tactical requirements, she observed during the formal debriefing. Disabling rather than killing the suspect preserved intelligence value while protecting civilian lives. The decision-making and execution were exactly what we hoped for when we formed this unit. Elena appreciated the recognition, but she was more focused on understanding how the operation fit into larger law enforcement objectives and what lessons could be applied to future missions. The tactical success was gratifying, but the real measure of effectiveness would be whether the suspect's capture led to actionable intelligence about other threats. The media coverage of the incident was carefully managed to protect operational security, while acknowledging that law enforcement had successfully prevented what could have been a significant terrorist attack. Elena's role was not mentioned in public statements, reflecting the unit's need to maintain the anonymity that allowed them to operate effectively in sensitive situations. Elena returned to her apartment that evening with a deeper understanding of what her new career would involve. The technical challenges of precision shooting were manageable with proper training and equipment, but the psychological and political complexities of real operations extended far beyond anything she had anticipated during her transition from patrol work. Detective Chen called that night to check on Elena's adjustment to operational stress, drawing on her FBI experience with critical incidents to provide guidance about processing the emotional aspects of using deadly force. The conversation helped Elena understand that even experienced operators continued to struggle with the psychological demands of their work. Elena's father called the next morning, having seen news reports about the prevented attack without knowing his daughter's involvement. She couldn't provide details about her role, but she assured him that she was safe and that her work was making a meaningful contribution to public safety. His pride in her career progression was evident despite the limited information she could share. The unit's second operational assignment came 2 weeks later, involving a hostage situation where conventional tactical approaches had failed and negotiation efforts had reached an impasse. The hostage-taker was barricaded in a building with multiple civilian captives, threatening to kill them unless his political demands were met. Elena found herself in a similar Overwatch position, but this time the psychological pressure was different, because she could see the hostages through her scope and understood that her actions might directly determine whether they lived or died. The tactical challenges were complicated by the hostage-taker's erratic behavior and the building's layout, which limited her shooting angles. The operation stretched over 14 hours, with Elena maintaining her position while negotiations continued and various tactical options were evaluated and discarded. The mental strain of extended readiness, combined with the emotional pressure of watching innocent people in danger, created stress levels that tested her training in psychological preparation. Detective Freeman again served as her spotter, but this operation required more complex coordination with the negotiation team and tactical units that were attempting to breach the building from multiple directions simultaneously. Elena had to maintain awareness of friendly forces while focusing on potential engagement opportunities. The resolution came suddenly when the hostage-taker began shooting at the captives, forcing an immediate tactical response that eliminated negotiation as an option. Elena's shot had to be taken through a narrow window opening while the target was moving and partially concealed, with hostages positioned dangerously close to the point of impact. Elena's training and natural abilities converged in a moment of perfect execution. The shot struck the hostage-taker precisely where intended, immediately incapacitating him and ending the threat to the civilian captives. The tactical situation was resolved within seconds, but the psychological impact on Elena was significant. The hostage rescue operation validated the unit's capabilities and demonstrated that Elena's exceptional marksmanship could be consistently applied under the most demanding real-world conditions. Her performance established her reputation within the law enforcement community as someone who could be trusted with the most challenging assignments. Elena began to understand that her career had been transformed not just by the recognition of her shooting skills, but by her ability to perform under pressure in ways that extended beyond simple marksmanship. The psychological stability and decision-making capabilities that enabled precision shooting also made her valuable for missions that required complex judgment under extreme stress. The simple woman who had been rejected from SWAT training had become one of the most capable precision shooters in law enforcement. But more importantly, she had proven that exceptional performance could emerge from unexpected sources when individuals were given opportunities to demonstrate their true capabilities, rather than being limited by conventional expectations and institutional biases. 3 months into her assignment with the Precision Response Unit, Elena received word that Commander Richard Blackwood, the same man who had rejected her SWAT application, was requesting a meeting to discuss what he described as important departmental initiatives. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her, but Elena approached the meeting with the same professional composure that had characterized her response to his original rejection. Commander Blackwood's office reflected his 22 years in law enforcement, with commendations and photographs documenting a career built on traditional approaches to tactical operations. When Elena arrived for the scheduled meeting, she found him studying a file that she recognized as her personnel record, updated to include her recent assignments with the Counterterrorism Task Force. Dynamic in the room was markedly different from their previous interaction. Where Blackwood had once projected authority and dismissiveness, Elena now detected something that resembled uncertainty, perhaps even regret. His body language suggested someone who was reconsidering previous judgments and trying to understand how his assessment had been so fundamentally wrong. "Detective Vasquez," Blackwood began, his tone more respectful than she remembered from their previous encounters. "I've been following your work with the Counterterrorism Task Force. Your performance has been remarkable, and it's generated considerable discussion within law enforcement circles about precision shooting capabilities and specialized unit effectiveness." Elena maintained professional courtesy while internally noting the contrast between his current recognition and his previous dismissal of her qualifications. She understood that Blackwood's change in attitude was likely motivated by professional pragmatism rather than personal growth, but she was curious about what he hoped to accomplish through this meeting. Blackwood continued, apparently building toward a specific request that he was having difficulty articulating directly. "The SWAT unit has been reevaluating our selection criteria and training protocols based on recent developments in tactical operations. We're particularly interested in incorporating precision shooting capabilities that would enhance our effectiveness in complex hostage situations and high-risk warrant service." Elena recognized the subtext immediately. The counterterrorism task force's success in handling situations that challenged conventional tactical approaches had created pressure on traditional units to adapt their capabilities. Blackwood was essentially acknowledging that his previous assessment of her qualifications had been incorrect, and that the SWAT unit needed the kinds of skills he had originally dismissed as irrelevant. "What specifically are you proposing?" Elena asked, though she suspected the answer would involve some form of collaboration or consultation that would allow SWAT to benefit from her expertise, without Blackwood having to admit that his selection process had been flawed. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably in his chair before responding. "We'd like you to develop training protocols for precision shooting under stress, and possibly serve as an instructor for selected SWAT personnel who show aptitude for specialized marksmanship. Your experience with real-world operations would be invaluable for updating our training standards." The request was reasonable from a professional standpoint, but Elena understood that accepting would essentially mean helping to improve the unit that had rejected her application based on superficial assessments rather than actual capabilities. The irony was too obvious to ignore, but she also recognized that cooperation might benefit both units and ultimately serve the broader goals of law enforcement effectiveness. Elena considered her response carefully, understanding that how she handled this situation would affect not only her relationship with SWAT, but also the broader perception of the precision response unit within the department. She could afford to be gracious in victory while ensuring that the lessons of her experience weren't lost on future selection processes. "I'd be willing to consult on training development," Elena replied, "but any collaboration would need to include a comprehensive review of selection criteria to ensure that qualified candidates aren't overlooked based on physical characteristics or conventional expectations about what tactical operators should look like." Blackwood's expression suggested that he had anticipated this condition and was prepared to accept it as the price of accessing her expertise. His willingness to modify selection criteria represented a significant shift in thinking that went beyond simple recognition of Elena's individual capabilities. The meeting concluded with an agreement to establish a working group that would develop new training protocols while reviewing the selection processes that had previously limited the SWAT unit's effectiveness. Elena left Blackwood's office with mixed feelings about the arrangement, but with satisfaction that her success had created opportunities to prevent other qualified candidates from experiencing similar rejection. Elena's consultation work with SWAT began the following week, starting with an assessment of their current training programs and identification of areas where precision shooting capabilities could be integrated. She quickly discovered that the unit's approach to marksmanship was fundamentally different from what she had learned with the counter-terrorism task force, focused more on volume of fire than accuracy under pressure. The SWAT team members who participated in the initial assessment sessions were professional but clearly curious about the woman who had been rejected from their unit only to achieve success at a much higher level. Elena approached the training with the same methodical preparation that characterized all her work, developing scenarios that would challenge their existing assumptions about tactical shooting. Officer Michael Torres, one of the more experienced SWAT operators, proved particularly receptive to Elena's instruction methods. His background included military service, but he readily acknowledged that his training had emphasized different priorities than the precision shooting that Elena demonstrated during practical exercises. "I never realized how much my accuracy degraded under stress until you started measuring it systematically," Torres observed after completing a complex shooting scenario that included multiple variables designed to simulate real-world pressure. "The techniques you're teaching actually improve performance when things get chaotic." Elena's approach to instruction emphasized the mental aspects of precision shooting as much as the technical skills, helping students understand how stress affected their performance and providing strategies for maintaining accuracy when everything around them was falling apart. Her own experience with high-pressure operations provided credibility that couldn't be replicated through classroom instruction alone. The training program development process revealed fundamental differences in philosophy between traditional tactical units and the specialized precision approach that Elena represented. SWAT operations typically relied on overwhelming force and rapid resolution, while precision shooting required patience, calculation, and the ability to wait for exactly the right moment to act. Elena worked with Sergeant Lisa Chun from her unit to develop scenarios that integrated both approaches, creating training exercises where SWAT operators had to coordinate their actions with precision shooters, who were positioned to provide overwatch and selective engagement capabilities. The collaboration proved challenging but ultimately productive for both units. Commander Blackwood observed several of the training sessions, his demeanor suggesting someone who was beginning to understand how significantly his previous assessments had underestimated both Elena's capabilities and the value of precision shooting in tactical operations. His presence at the training sessions represented a level of personal involvement that surprised many of the participants. The selection criteria review process proved more contentious than the training development, requiring Elena to document the ways that traditional evaluation methods had failed to identify her qualifications while creating new assessment protocols that would recognize diverse forms of tactical aptitude. The work was politically sensitive because it implicitly criticized the decision-making processes that had been used for years. Elena approached the selection criteria review with the same systematic methodology that characterized her shooting, analyzing data from multiple sources and identifying patterns that revealed the limitations of conventional assessment approaches. Her analysis demonstrated that physical characteristics had been overemphasized at the expense of mental capabilities and technical skills. The review process also revealed that Elena was not the only qualified candidate who had been overlooked by traditional selection methods. Several other officers had been rejected for reasons that had more to do with conventional expectations than actual job requirements, suggesting that the department had been consistently underutilizing available talent. Detective Freeman joined Elena for some of the selection criteria discussions, providing his military perspective on the kinds of capabilities that actually mattered in high-stress tactical situations. His input reinforced Elena's arguments that mental stability and technical proficiency were more important than physical intimidation or conventional appearance standards. The working group's recommendations were comprehensive and represented a fundamental shift in how specialized tactical positions would be evaluated in the future. Physical fitness remained important, but it was balanced against technical skills. psychological stability, and demonstrated performance under pressure. The changes would affect not only SWAT selection, but also recruitment for other specialized units. Elena's influence on departmental training and selection policies extended beyond her direct consultation work, as other agencies began requesting information about the methods and protocols that had been developed through her collaboration with SWAT. Her reputation within law enforcement circles continued to grow, based not only on her operational successes, but also on her contributions to improving training and selection processes. The media attention surrounding Elena's work remained carefully managed to protect operational security, but law enforcement publications began featuring articles about the effectiveness of precision shooting in tactical operations and the importance of evaluating candidates based on capability rather than conventional expectations. Elena was often quoted anonymously as a subject matter expert. Elena's father visited the city 6 months after her transition to the Counterterrorism Task Force, though she still couldn't provide him with detailed information about her specific assignments. His pride in her career progression was evident, but he was more interested in understanding how she had handled the challenges and setbacks that had led to her current success. "You know," Miguel observed during dinner at a restaurant near Elena's apartment, "when you were 12 years old and learning to shoot, I never imagined you'd end up doing this kind of work. But I always knew you had something special that went beyond just being able to hit targets accurately." Elena appreciated her father's perspective on her development, particularly his observation that her success had been built on characteristics that had been evident long before she considered a law enforcement career. His recognition of her capabilities had provided the foundation of confidence that enabled her to persist through rejection and ultimately achieve success at levels she had never originally imagined. The conversation with her father helped Elena understand how much her perspective on her own career had changed since joining the Precision Response Unit. The woman who had applied to SWAT had been focused on gaining acceptance and proving that she belonged. The detective who now served on the Counterterrorism Task Force was focused on excellence and continuous improvement in service of larger mission objectives. Elena's success began attracting attention from federal agencies that were interested in recruiting officers with her specialized capabilities. The FBI and other organizations started making informal inquiries about her availability and interest in positions that would provide even greater responsibility and more challenging assignments. Captain Mitchell discussed these opportunities with Elena during one of their regular performance reviews, acknowledging that the Counterterrorism Task Force couldn't match the resources and mission scope that federal agencies could offer. However, she also emphasized the value of Elena's contributions to local law enforcement and the importance of maintaining institutional knowledge within the department. Elena found herself in the enviable position of having multiple career options, each offering different advantages and challenges. Federal agencies provided larger resources and more complex missions, but local law enforcement offered closer community connections and the satisfaction of directly protecting the people she had grown up among. The decision-making process was complicated by Elena's recognition that her success had created responsibilities that extended beyond her personal career advancement. Her work with SWAT had demonstrated that qualified candidates were being overlooked by traditional selection processes, and her departure might reduce pressure for continued reforms in evaluation and training protocols. Elena ultimately decided to remain with the Counterterrorism Task Force, while accepting consultation opportunities with federal agencies that would allow her to contribute to larger missions without abandoning the local law enforcement reforms that her success had made possible. The arrangement provided the best of both worlds while maintaining her commitment to institutional improvement. The Precision Response Unit's effectiveness continued to attract national attention as other cities began developing similar capabilities. Based on the model that Elena and her teammates had helped establish, Their success in handling high-risk situations with minimal civilian casualties and maximum precision had proven the value of specialized marksmanship in modern law enforcement. Elena was invited to speak at law enforcement conferences about precision shooting techniques and selection criteria reforms, though her presentations always emphasized team capabilities rather than individual achievements. Her approach to public speaking reflected the same methodical preparation and focus on practical applications that characterized her operational work. The conference presentations provided Elena with opportunities to interact with law enforcement professionals from across the country, many of whom were dealing with similar challenges related to talent identification and specialized unit development. Her insights about overcoming institutional biases and recognizing diverse forms of tactical aptitude proved valuable to departments that were struggling with outdated selection processes. Elena's influence on law enforcement training extended beyond precision shooting to include broader discussions about performance evaluation, stress management, and the integration of specialized capabilities into traditional tactical operations. Her experience had demonstrated that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources when evaluation processes focused on capability rather than conventional expectations. The transformation of Elena's career from rejected SWAT applicant to nationally recognized law enforcement specialist became a case study that was taught in police academies and leadership training programs. However, the focus was always on the systemic lessons rather than individual heroics, emphasizing the importance of comprehensive evaluation processes and the value of persistence in pursuing professional goals. Commander Blackwood's own career was affected by the reforms that Elena's success had catalyzed, though in ways that ultimately enhanced his reputation rather than damaging it. His willingness to acknowledge mistakes and implement changes demonstrated leadership capabilities that earned recognition from his superiors and respect from subordinates who had previously questioned his judgment. The SWAT unit's performance improved significantly after implementing the training protocols and selection criteria that Elena had helped develop. Their success in handling complex tactical situations increased, while civilian casualties decreased, validating the approaches that had initially seemed controversial or unnecessary to traditional tactical operators. Elena's work with SWAT also created opportunities for other officers who had been overlooked by conventional selection processes, including several women and smaller-statured men who possessed technical skills and mental capabilities that proved valuable in specialized operations. The diversification of tactical units enhanced their overall effectiveness while creating more equitable career advancement opportunities. 2 years after her initial rejection from SWAT, Elena was promoted to lieutenant and given responsibility for managing the Precision Response Unit's expansion to include additional personnel and broader mission responsibilities. Her leadership role represented the kind of career advancement that would have been impossible if she had accepted the original rejection as definitive rather than pursuing alternative opportunities. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez found herself in the position of evaluating candidates for the unit that had launched her career, applying the same comprehensive assessment methods that she had helped develop for SWAT selection. Her approach emphasized capability over conventional characteristics, ensuring that qualified candidates weren't overlooked because they didn't fit traditional expectations about what tactical operators should look like. Elena's evaluation of new candidates was informed by her own experience with rejection and recognition, helping her identify individuals who possessed exceptional capabilities that might not be obvious through standard assessment methods. Her ability to recognize potential in unexpected candidates became one of her most valuable leadership skills. The unit's continued success under Elena's leadership validated the decision to promote her and demonstrated that technical expertise could be effectively combined with management responsibilities. Her approach to leadership emphasized the same methodical preparation and focus on excellence that had characterized her development as a precision shooter. Elena's success story began appearing in recruiting materials used by police departments across the country, though always with careful attention to protecting her operational security and personal privacy. The narrative focused on the importance of persistence and the value of comprehensive evaluation processes rather than individual heroics or dramatic operational details. The simple woman who had been rejected from SWAT training had become a leader whose influence extended far beyond her original career aspirations, transforming not only her own professional trajectory, but also the institutional processes that determined opportunities for countless other law enforcement professionals. Her legacy was built on the recognition that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected sources when evaluation processes focused on capability rather than conventional expectations. Elena's journey from rejection to leadership demonstrated that institutional biases could be overcome through exceptional performance and persistent advocacy for systemic change. Her success had created pathways for others while proving that the most important qualifications for specialized law enforcement work were competence, character, and the ability to perform under pressure rather than physical characteristics or conventional appearance standards. The shooting range where Elena had first learned marksmanship from her father remained a place she visited regularly, though now her practice sessions included advanced techniques and equipment that reflected her specialized training and operational experience. The fundamentals that Miguel had taught her decades earlier provided the foundation for capabilities that had transformed her career and influenced law enforcement practices across the country. Elena understood that her story was ultimately about more than individual success or career advancement. It was about the importance of recognizing and developing human potential regardless of conventional expectations, and the responsibility of successful individuals to create opportunities for others who might face similar challenges or barriers. The woman who had once been dismissed as too small and too cautious for tactical operations had proven that size and appearance had nothing to do with the mental discipline and technical skills that characterize effective law enforcement professionals. Her success had opened doors for others while demonstrating that institutional change was possible when individuals refused to accept limitations that weren't based on actual job requirements. Elena's career continued to evolve in directions that would have been unimaginable when she first applied to SWAT, but the core principles that had guided her development remained constant: preparation, persistence, and a commitment to excellence that transcended conventional expectations about what was possible for someone with her background and characteristics. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.